Well, we're rolling with the sixth submission today in this Digital Democracy series to do with the Crown Lands Management Bill 2016. And we have our sixth respondent, and if you would like to introduce yourself and your interest in the matter.
Okay, I'm Susie Gold and I live at Castle Crag in Willoughby, and my interest was originally just Talus. Talus is an area of Crown land that Willoughby Council allowed the North Shore Tennis Association to have for 20 years without any rent, and then they put a peppercorn rent onto it, and then the NSTA then subleased this land to Love and Juice, and who make millions of dollars, and council and residents are making no money from this at all. So I've been fighting that particular issue for a number of years now, but on a very, very personal level.
So you've educated yourself about the existing Crown Lands provisions. Can I first ask you, many people seem to be confused about the very notion of Crown Lands. We did have our former councillor here who informed us that her research showed that in fact originally it was the Aboriginal lands, and therefore Crown Lands took over that particular part of the land. There seemed to be a lot of misunderstanding about what it is. What do you see Crown land as?
Public land, parks, foreshore. I'm just talking about in my area in particular. Public space, parks. I mean,
What's the difference between Crown lands and, for example, council-owned land or state government land?
Often a lot of the Crown land is now managed by council, and the public isn't aware of what...
So it's not owned by council?
No, it's not owned by council, but the general public isn't really aware of what Crown land is. So this whole thing becomes a mishmash because nobody really... It's all gobbledygook, as they say. They don't understand what we're talking about. And there should have been a far greater explanation to the public of what's going on, of what Crown land is and why they want to change this.
So Crown land, in the course of this series, we've researched that. We've discovered that Crown land is meant to be kept for a particular purpose, or preservation or recreational or otherwise purpose, in perpetuity on behalf of the people of New South Wales.
That's right.
But it's not actually owned by councils or any state department per se. It's a people's asset. Is that your understanding?
That's correct. It's supposedly managed by councils
and various other state bodies, presumably.
Who unfortunately haven't been doing that.
And the existing system of trusts and so on, and there's been much talk about that. That in our research showed there appeared to be in the late 80s some bipartisan legislative changes that introduced some integrity or tried to the trust structure. Some of the testimony today seems to be that hasn't really been very effective.
No, in Willoughby there is no such, there is no trust at all. Monies are supposed to go into a trust account.
Yes.
Willoughby Council doesn't have any trust accounts, does it? So the money just goes into the general coffers, and we can't find out what's even happened to it. So it's a real fear of if this goes ahead, how much worse can it get?
Yes. So I know that you've talked to me off camera about just both the definition of what Crown lands are, but also of which specific parcels of land we have found it very difficult, even in the days of Google and land services and so on, to find any definitive list or description of the Crown lands of New South Wales, purportedly 44%. That seems to be a bit of an issue. If you're going to talk about something, you need to know what we're talking about.
Well, I emailed Crown Lands Department and asked them could they please give me a full comprehensive list, to which they replied they don't have a full comprehensive list, but in fact they just have an idea of where it is and they rely on the public to tell them, which I just find, how can you make a legislation...
So they're relying on the public to tell them...
it says in the email back to me.
I see. Well, that seems to be a curious proposition.
Well, it's absurd.
So, in the light of this, is not the legislation before us then trying to, as it says, it's a Crown Land Management Bill, how do you think that could be informed without sufficient information?
Look, how can you manage something if you don't know the total of what you've got? I don't understand how you can do it.
I'm struggling here because the logic is very strange. Though I'm trying to play a role of someone who may put this legislation up. Why do you think this legislative suggestion has come up, and why so hasty? What are the
I don't think
reasons
it's so
why?
hasty. I think we've got a letter from NSTA, which is North Shore Tennis Association, dated 2013, where they were hoping for a change in legislation. I believe that this has been on the cards, so as to speak, for many, many years, but it's just been landed on us under the Baird government, and I think that it's got to do with forced council amalgamations, and this government wanting to direct exactly what they want, and there'll be a lot.
What motivation could that possibly be? I mean, I know that people have talked to wiping out past, washing, if you will, past sins or mismanagement, malpractice. What other motivations could there possibly be for this?
Look, I spoke to a very well-known man the other day, and he said to me, Susie, democracy now is a form of corruption. And I said to him, but that's not what I'm worried about. What I'm worried about is transparency. And he said to me, they're very transparent. They're transparent in their disdain for you. They don't want you to know. And I found that quite shocking, but I think it's quite true. And then he went on to say, don't think that if you vote for another government next time that it's going to change. It's not going to change. It's a two-party situation, and things aren't going to change. And so it's quite frightening to think that one person has this power to give his mates jobs. I'm sorry, I really think it's jobs for your mates. If that's what's going to happen, it's going, well, yeah.
Well, to come back, to pull you back, I know that you're very
I'm
upset
just upset.
about
I am upset about it. I'm upset, not for me, because it doesn't directly affect me per se, but it affects all of us.
It seems to be an affront to some logic that we carry with us through. Well, the attempt in this digital democracy series is connect people, normal citizens, with the legislators, so that they may be able to pick up some of the pulse of the community. It doesn't seem like this pulse is getting through to some people, and we're hoping that with good information packaged up well, that it may actually do something. But to get back to the motivation, why? What purpose? Specific purpose will or let's put it another way. What changes could happen if this legislation was to pass?
Well, I can see my local park that I go to 3 or 4 times a week, Tunks Park. I can see them just charging us to go there. I can see them turning part of it into a large car park. I can see that there'll be all sorts of changes in lots of areas where we will have absolutely no say, but the developers will have a lot of say if they're mates with whoever's in power. So I'm very, very concerned, and we've got no comeback. That's the terrible thing is, but not only have we got no comeback, we have no knowledge. Nobody has told us anything. In Willoughby, there's been absolutely no discussion of this at all. Absolutely nothing.
Well, Willoughby's a well-to-do area with a lot of educated people.
Yes.
It seems to be entirely illogical that the people of Willoughby wouldn't demand to know.
But if they don't know something's there, they can't make a demand. If it's kept so quiet, they can't make a command. They can't ask questions. And where I've gone around wearing billboards trying to explain things to people, I'm in Castle Crag. Tallis is on the other side. Nobody even knows what Tallis is. So at the moment we're talking about the Haven, which is there's a wonderful amphitheatre there. Now I've actually got people's ears because I'm talking about an area that's in a very wealthy part of Willoughby, and there are real problems with trust funds. Now people are starting to listen, but it's a wide area. It's not like Gosford and Newcastle. It's a different sort of area, and There's no,
So
I
a lack
find there's
of-
no sense of community.
Yes. This information, to go back to the legislative proposal,
Yeah.
and if we think of the changes or the risks that the legislation may pose for the people of New South Wales moving into the distant future, what particular changes do you think this legislation could?
It'll annihilate Rutledge, and Rutledge is the ground.
Mm.
You know, the thing that grounds us all together. So if
So
Rutledge
the Rutledge decision that upheld the right for Crown lands to be managed in a
public
particular
land
fashion.
is, and if they get rid of that, it's all over.
So there's no
There's no comeback.
So the process of I haven't taken up directly, but the process of getting rid of Crown lands and reclassifying them into other classifications seems to be that the legislation allows that to happen.
Absolutely.
In
It allows the privatisation of the land.
So
Yeah.
in the end, that's
That's what it is. It's all private. It's privatising
you think.
42% of the state.
So the potential to privatise up to 42% of the state. Do you think that's a real fear? Proposition?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes. Well, that's it's been an educated process going through these interviews and doing research and having my team research this. A very complex issue and very difficult to get your head around. But we seem to be coming to a point where you're talking about public land,
It's
the
mass
risk of public
privatisation.
So this
There's
is,
policy, mass privatisation.
and is that to put land into the market, as it were, presumably, to make that happen?
Well, that's how I see it.
Well, that's the pointy end of the discussion. What would you ask to eventual legislators that are sitting here listening to that? What sort of request would you put to them if and when they do listen to this?
Please slow down. Please allow us far more time for this to be discussed, and please ensure that there is plenty of public knowledge through the press and through television programs, and start listening and hearing what we're saying. You know, it's there's a story. There's a thing I used to say to children. I used to say, go and clean your room, and then you turn to the child and say, tell me, what did I tell you? And the child would say, I don't know. And I think that's exactly what's happening here. They tell us that they're listening, but they have no idea what we're saying. And I think it's time that they have to start hearing us, hearing what we're saying.
Well, hopefully with that, that's a good way to conclude this series, because we're trying to package up complex information into hopefully a simple form so that legislators can get their heads and minds around the discussion. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Was that okay?
Yes, very good.
Sorry,
Very good.